What happens when Hollywood's most unpredictable tough guy sits down with late-night television's sharpest satirist, and everything goes completely off the rails? Well, you're about to find out, because what started as a routine promotional interview turned into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night history. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about live television. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was supposed to be a standard Tuesday night affair. Mark Wahlberg was scheduled to promote his latest action thriller, and the production team expected the usual banter about Boston, workouts, and maybe a few laughs about his past as Marky Mark. What they got instead was a powder keg that had been waiting to explode for years. Colbert, known for his razor-sharp political commentary and ability to make even the most seasoned politicians squirm, had done his homework. But this wasn't going to be about politics, at least not initially. The tension began building the moment Wahlberg walked onto the set. His usual confident swagger seemed different tonight, more aggressive, like a boxer entering the ring rather than an actor promoting a movie. The audience could sense something was off from the opening handshake. Colbert extended his hand with his trademark grin, but Wahlberg's grip lingered just a beat too long. His eyes locked on the host with an intensity that made the studio audience shift uncomfortably in their seats. The cameras caught every micro-expression, every subtle sign that this interview was about to become something entirely unexpected. As they settled into their chairs, Colbert launched into his usual opening pleasantries, but Wahlberg cut him off mid-sentence. "You know what, Stephen? Let's skip the small talk tonight. I've got some things I need to get off my chest." The host's eyebrows shot up, partly amused, partly concerned. This wasn't in the pre-interview notes. "Well, Mark, you've certainly got my attention, and I'm sure our audience is curious too. What's on your mind?" Colbert leaned back in his chair, adopting his classic interviewer pose, but there was a wariness in his eyes that veteran talk show watchers rarely saw. Wahlberg leaned forward, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced as his voice grew heated. "I'm tired of people like you sitting behind these desks, making jokes about working-class people, about guys like me who came from nothing. You think it's all a big joke, don't you? The struggles, the neighborhoods we came from, the fights we had to fight just to survive." The studio fell silent. This wasn't the playful ribbing that usually characterized Colbert's interviews. The audience could feel the genuine anger radiating from Wahlberg, and Colbert's comfortable smile began to fade as he realized this wasn't a bit or a promotional stunt. "Mark, I think there might be some misunderstanding here," Colbert began, his voice taking on a more measured tone. "I've never made light of anyone's struggles, especially not yours. In fact, I've always admired your journey from Dorchester to Hollywood. It's an incredible American success story." But Wahlberg wasn't buying it. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair as he continued his unexpected tirade. "Success story? You mean the story where you and your writer's room get to make jokes? About the kid who got in trouble, who made mistakes, who had to claw his way out of a place where most people never make it out? That success story?" The camera operators were getting signals from the control room, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial. This was uncharted territory for The Late Show, and everyone in the studio could feel the electricity of a moment that was about to explode into something much bigger. Colbert's quick wit, usually his greatest asset, seemed momentarily stunned by the raw emotion and accusation coming from his guest. "I want to understand what's really bothering you here, Mark," Colbert said, leaning forward slightly, matching Wahlberg's intensity. "Because I think we're talking about two very different things. Can you help me understand what specifically I've said or done that's upset you?" Wahlberg's laugh was bitter, devoid of any humor. "Oh, you want specifics? Let's talk about specifics." Wahlberg's eyes burned with the kind of intensity that made everyone in the studio remember he wasn't just an actor. He was a guy who had lived through real street fights. 3 weeks ago, you did that whole segment about Boston accents. Had Your writers do these ridiculous impressions. Got your audience laughing at how we talk. You think that's harmless comedy, Stephen? Let me tell you what that really is. The host shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting this level of personal attack. Mark, that was just a light-hearted bit about regional dialects. We've done segments on Southern accents, New York accents. It's not targeting anyone specifically. Not targeting anyone? Wahlberg's voice cracked with emotion. Every kid I grew up with talks like that. Every guy working construction in Southie, every woman waiting tables in Dorchester. When you make fun of how we sound, you're making fun of us. You're telling your educated audience that we're the punchline, that our voices don't matter. The audience was dead silent now. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was raw, unfiltered pain being broadcast live to millions of viewers. Colbert, usually quick with a response, seemed genuinely caught off guard by the depth of Wahlberg's anger. I understand you feel hurt by that segment, Colbert said carefully, but you're reading malicious intent where none existed. Comedy has always played with stereotypes and regional differences. It's not about superiority or looking down on anyone. Wahlberg slammed his hand on the desk, making both Colbert and the audience jump. There it is, stereotypes. You just admitted it. You reduce entire communities to stereotypes for laughs. Do you have any idea what it's like to walk into a business, meeting in Hollywood, and have people immediately judge you the second you open your mouth? The studio cameras caught Colbert's face as he processed this unexpected emotional outburst. His usual armor of wit and charm seemed inadequate for this moment. Mark, I think you're conflating two different issues here. Regional humor and systematic discrimination are not the same thing. Oh, really? Wahlberg's Boston accent grew thicker as his anger intensified. So when you have your whole audience laughing at people who sound like my mother, like my brothers, like everyone I grew up with, that's just innocent fun? When you do your little impression of blue-collar workers talking about politics, that's just comedy. The mention of specific segments hit Colbert like a slap. His professional composure began to crack. Those segments were about political discourse and media literacy, not about mocking working people. If you can't see that distinction, then maybe the problem isn't with my comedy. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down in a street fight. Wahlberg's face darkened, and for a moment, the entire studio held its breath. Security personnel at the edges of the stage tensed, ready to intervene if this verbal confrontation became physical. So now I'm the problem? Wahlberg's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than his shouting had. The guy who calls out the fancy comedian for looking down on regular people, he's the problem? You know what your real problem is, Stephen? Colbert leaned back slightly, his interviewer instincts warring with his personal pride. Enlighten me, Mark. What's my real problem? You've been sitting behind that desk so long, making jokes for your college-educated audience, that you've completely forgotten what it's like to be judged before you even speak. You've forgotten what it's like to have people assume you're stupid because of where you come from. You live in a bubble, man, and you don't even know it. The host's jaw tightened visibly. His Midwestern politeness was being tested by this sustained personal attack, and viewers could see his patience wearing thin. That's quite an assumption about someone you don't know, Mark. But since we're making personal observations, let me ask you something. When exactly did you become the spokesperson for working-class America? Because last I checked, you're worth about $300 million. The counterattack landed hard. Wahlberg's face flushed red, and the studio audience gasped audibly at the sudden escalation. This was no longer just about comedy segments or regional accents. This had become a full-scale confrontation between two very different versions of American success, and neither man was backing down. The mention of his wealth hit Wahlberg like a physical blow, but instead of retreating, it seemed to unleash something even more dangerous. He stood up from his chair, towering over the seated host, his face twisted with rage. You think money Changes where I come from? You think a bank account erases the kids who didn't make it out? I carry every one of those guys with me, Stephen. Every single day. The studio audience was now genuinely frightened. This wasn't television anymore. This was two men on the verge of something that could turn violent. Colbert remained seated, but his body language shifted defensively as Wahlberg loomed over him. "Mark, I need you to sit back down," Colbert said, his voice steady but with clear authority. "This is getting out of hand, and we both know it." "Out of hand?" Wahlberg laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to see out of hand, Stephen? You want to see what happens when someone who actually lived through real struggle gets tired of listening to privileged comedians mock his people?" That's when the production team made their move. The show's security coordinator, who had been watching nervously from the wings, started moving toward the stage, but Wahlberg caught the movement in his peripheral vision and whirled around. "Don't even think about it," he snapped at the approaching security. "I'm not done talking to your boss here." Colbert stood up now, matching Wahlberg's height and intensity. The pretense of this being a normal interview had completely evaporated. "Actually, Mark, I think you are done. This is my show. These are my people, and you're making my audience uncomfortable. I'm going to ask you to leave." The words landed like a thunderclap. Wahlberg's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed to slits. "You're kicking me off? You're actually kicking me off your show because I called you out for being exactly what you are?" "I'm asking you to leave because you're behaving like a bully," Colbert replied, his voice growing stronger with each word. "You came on my show under false pretenses. You've spent the last 15 minutes attacking me personally, and now you're intimidating my staff. That's not passionate discourse, Mark. That's just bad behavior." The studio fell into an eerie silence. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut away from what was clearly an unprecedented situation in late-night television history. Wahlberg took a step closer to Colbert, close enough that the host could probably smell his cologne. "Bad behavior? You want to talk about bad behavior? How about spending years making jokes about people you've never met, communities you've never lived in, struggles you've never faced? How about building your career on looking down at people like me?" "Security, please escort Mr. Wahlberg out," Colbert said firmly, never breaking eye contact with his guest. The authority in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a request, it was an order. 3 security personnel moved onto the stage, their presence immediately changing the dynamic. Wahlberg looked around at them, then back at Colbert, his chest heaving with adrenaline and fury. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Wahlberg said, his voice carrying across the now deadly quiet studio. "The second someone challenges you, the second someone calls you out for your elitist garbage, you hide behind your security and your power. You can't handle the truth about who you really are." "The truth?" Colbert shot back, his own composure finally cracking completely. "The truth is, you're a middle-aged millionaire having a public meltdown because you didn't like a comedy bit. The truth is, you've turned what should have been a professional interview into a personal attack, because you can't separate criticism of your work from criticism of your character." Wahlberg stepped back, but his eyes never left Colbert's face. "My work? We weren't even talking about my work, Stephen. We were talking about yours. And the fact that you can't see the difference tells me everything I need to know about you." The security team was now flanking Wahlberg, ready to physically remove him if necessary. The lead security officer, a professional who had clearly handled situations like this before, spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Mr. Wahlberg, we need you to come with us now." For a moment it looked like Wahlberg might resist. The tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Then suddenly he laughed. Not the bitter laugh from earlier, but something that sounded almost relieved. "You know what, Stephen? This has been more honest than any interview you've done in years. At least now your audience knows exactly who they're really watching every night." With that, Mark Wahlberg walked off the late show stage, flanked by security, leaving behind one of the most explosive confrontations in television history. As he disappeared into the wings, the studio remained in stunned silence, with Stephen Colbert standing alone behind his desk, trying to process what had just happened. The cameras kept rolling for another few seconds before finally cutting to commercial, but the damage was done. In less than 20 minutes, a routine promotional interview had become a career-defining moment for both men, a raw display of class resentment and personal animosity that would be dissected and debated for years to come. So what do you think really drove Mark Wahlberg to explode like that on live television? Was this years of built-up resentment finally boiling over, or was there something deeper going on? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more explosive celebrity stories that you won't see anywhere else.